Hello everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Can you think of a time where you felt conflicted? Conflict within ourselves can arise at the most inopportune times, leaving us to contemplate whether it's a decision you have to make or even just deciding how you feel about something. Most of the time, we can weigh these choices on a mental scale and determine how we proceed based on logic. Of course, that's when and where logic applies. Because sometimes the conflict we feel isn't our own. Instead, it's something that has a hold on us, something we aren't exactly in control of. It's times like this that logic is hard to find, if not impossible. So we reach for other ideas, other solutions to resolve such a foreign confliction. And who knew the path to resolution could be so terrifying? So, let's get started, shall we? In 2013, I moved into a new 3-house complex with my parents. I had a Siberian Husky, the goodest of boys, who spent his nights in the backyard, and my bedroom was above the garage, which was connected to the backyard. On our second night there, my parents were sleeping in their room. I heard my dog barking at 11:30. When he wouldn't stop, I got a little concerned, decided to check things out. He was getting older by then. His behavior wasn't always normal. He was very agitated, and it was a struggle to calm him down, but I eventually got him settled. I then went to wash my hands in the bathroom, and I felt someone touch my right shoulder, and a female voice asked, "Why did you take the dog away?" At first, I thought it was my mom. I told her that he would have kept the neighbors awake if I didn't. But then I realized it couldn't have been her because she was still in bed. And I immediately ran upstairs to confirm both of my parents were in fact asleep. A couple of days later, our neighbor came to introduce themselves. She was clearly distressed. After asking what was going on, she informed us that only 2 days before our arrival, her nanny had committed suicide inside her house. The cherry on top, she was worried that her youngest child would make a comment about still seeing her around the house. I personally believe it was the nanny's restless spirit that spoke to me that day. But it's never happened again. This happened 12 years ago, when I was 16, and my sister and I had 2 friends staying over for a sleepover. It was the middle of summer. We lived in a tiny town surrounded by lots of farmland. My sister and one friend fell asleep fairly early, but I stayed up chatting with the other for a while. We had our mattress on the floor, right by the 3 big windows in my sister's room upstairs. From the windows, you could see an elementary school across the street, and to the left, a parking lot. Directly across from us, on the other side of that, was a farmer's field. We were up until almost 3 a.m. with those windows wide open, enjoying the warm summer air. Suddenly, my friend stops the conversation, says something like, "Oh, who's that?" I follow her gaze. I see that she's looking towards the farmer's field. I see 2 figures coming out of the field. It's obviously dark, and they haven't come into the streetlight yet, so I can't make out any features, but I assume it's just some of the kids in the neighborhood. My friend and I continue to watch in silence as these 2 people make their way into the streetlights. and they're coming directly towards the house. Now, I really assume it's someone I know, because there's a few teen boys that would often be out late, and they'd come to the house, talk to me and my sisters from the window. As they're getting closer, we begin to make out their appearance, and I was truly shocked at how they looked. These two individuals couldn't have been taller than 5 feet. They were identical in all features that we could make out. And I mean, absolutely identical. They were both Caucasian, white. They both had bald heads, and they were both wearing the same long brown robe with a tie at the waist. How I would describe it is they sort of looked like they were in monk attire. They were proportional as well. No big heads or big eyes. They just looked like littler people. Even though they clearly don't look like anyone I know, as they're coming towards the house, I begin to call out to them, sort of a loud whisper, "Hey, hey you." Then I start yelling out names of the different people that I knew in town. I think that I was in a bit of disbelief and thought maybe it was a prank. All while my friend is totally stunned into silence. These beings make it just up to my parents' cars parked outside, so we have a very clear view of them. And then they immediately turn to themselves and go back in the direction toward the field. They never once acknowledged my calls. They didn't even look up. But they also appeared to be in a discussion with each other, though my friend and we didn't make out any sounds coming from them. We continued to watch them make their way back across the road, and then instead of going back into the field, they start walking down the road. We watch them until we can no longer see them. If you follow that specific road, it just leads to more fields and away from the houses. My friend and I stayed up for another hour talking about what the heck we saw. She's very Christian, so she believes it was demonic. I have no idea. It very well could have been demonic, but also it's just so random. The next day, we told everyone, and they all seemed kind of freaked out, even my parents. I have so many questions. Why did they come towards the house, only to turn back on themselves? I've wondered if they intentionally did that, like they knew that we were there, and they wanted to be seen by us. Why were their appearances absolutely identical? Why bald, short? Why the brown robes? Also, what's up with being out at 3 a.m. in a field? I've Googled and I haven't been able to find much. I did find an obscure YouTube video of a lady saying that she was visited by 7 beings that sound exactly like what my friend and I saw, but I haven't found anything else. This lady said they're interdimensional beings and that they know the future. Anyway, I'd love to hear if anyone else has seen these beings or what your thoughts are. Thanks for reading. I believe in the paranormal to some extent, and it does scare me, but I usually get over it quickly. I've had a couple of experiences in the past, but this one, it's just plain weird. A couple of hours ago, I was in my room drawing on my new tablet. My little sister came in and said that a cat was meowing loudly in the backyard. We see a lot of strays around, so that wasn't unusual, but most of the cats are fully grown and don't meow. My sister and I went into the kitchen, looked through the sliding glass door, but we didn't see anything. I returned to drawing, and a couple of minutes later, my sister was back. She said the cat was meowing again, so I agreed to take another look, but still, there was nothing. Most of the cats we see are white and easy to spot in the dark, but we also have a light in the backyard, and so do our neighbors. It wouldn't be hard to see a cat if it was there. This time, I sat on one of the kitchen chairs, and I waited with my sister for almost 10 minutes, but nothing happened, so we left. I was drawing in my room, and about 10 minutes ago, I suddenly heard meowing. It sort of sounded like a cat, but it also didn't. It was definitely how a cat meows, but the tone was deep and just altogether strange. My body became tense. I started sweating a little. My room, it's on the opposite side of the house. I shouldn't be able to hear a cat in the backyard. What really got me was how the meowing seemed to come from directly behind me. It only lasted for about 30 seconds, and I didn't have the courage to turn around until it had stopped. Now, I'm laying in bed, hearing strange noises in every direction. Update: my closet doors are crooked. The bottom closes tight while leaving a small crack at the top. The gap was on the right side, but it somehow switched to the left. I certainly didn't move it, and nobody else has entered my room since my sister, who was never near the closet. This is something I'll probably never forget. I'm 18 now, but I was 14 at the time, and my friend was 13. We lived in a small, normal village where nothing weird ever happened. My friend was staying the night, so we played games and had a good time. This was during the winter, so it was already pitch black outside by basically noon. From where we sat, there was the door on our right and 2 big windows to our left. Suddenly, the whole room flashed light blue. I barely saw it while looking down at my phone, but it was unmistakable. I looked around, wondering what it could have been, but I didn't see anything. So we continued playing. I didn't know if my friend saw it, but he didn't react, so I didn't ask. About 20 seconds later, the room flashed blue again, and the radiator beneath the windows began vibrating. I could feel it on the couch, too. It wasn't loud, but we clearly heard it. The rest of the house was completely silent. I was a little frightened, but mostly curious, so my friend and I looked out the windows. Everything was normal at first, but then the whole sky flashed a bright blue color, like it was daylight again. And that's when I became really frightened. We kept watching until it happened again. Then we ran back to the couch. I hid under the covers. The radiator continued vibrating, and I could barely see the room turning bright blue. We looked outside once more, this time towards the neighbor's house, and we saw a big blue light beam coming from the sky, straight down into the ground, filling the dark night with a bright blue color. It was terrifying. I've never seen anything like it. We ran to the kitchen to look, and it happened once more. We don't know what it could have been, and I don't know anyone else who saw it. I would love to have some kind of explanation. I'm an 18-year-old female. My mother-in-law is 39. One afternoon, we had a terrifying paranormal experience while her fiancé and mine were both at work. After laying my 2-year-old down for a nap, I went to my mother-in-law's room for a chat. She was sitting on the bed, and I was leaning against her closet with one foot on the bed. As the conversation went on, we both suddenly went still and quiet. It sounded like someone was moving inside the closet, and there was a knock on the door. My mother-in-law shot up, told me to keep holding the door shut while she retrieved a hammer and some nails. Then, she nailed the door shut, shoved a chair under the knob. Afterward, I looked under the door, and I saw that items inside the closet had been moved, and then I saw shadows. We called a neighbor to see when she would be home so that I could stay with my daughter. My mother-in-law and I tried to spend the hour's wait in the living room, but 5 minutes later, we heard someone ramming into the closet door, like they were trying to escape. We quickly picked up my daughter and ran next door while my mother-in-law called the police. Less than 10 minutes later, 4 cruisers arrived. 2 cops entered through the back door, while others went through the front. Roughly 15 minutes later, all the cops came out and said that they heard the same noises before they even entered the room. But when they opened the closet, no one was inside. He was positive we had a haunting. Suggested we should get a priest instead. I apologized for wasting their time, but they said it was better to be safe than sorry. They had also thought someone was inside when they heard the noises. At least I know we didn't just imagine it. But what do you think? Could it have been a ghost? What other explanation is there? I have several vivid memories from my early childhood, and at age 5, I began having terrible nightmares. I couldn't wake up from them, and I would think they were real for days. I still have night terrors like this where I wake up deeply disturbed, screaming, covered in new scratches and bruises. When I was 6, my 2 best friends moved away, and that's my last real memory before falling asleep and waking up at age 10. The alternate life and reality are very similar in many ways, but there were enough differences and scattered memories to be noticeable. I remember things that supposedly never happened, and I have no memory of things that did. For example, I remember babysitting the neighbor's kids for 30 minutes when I was 8, but after waking up 4 years later, the kids were the same age, yet I didn't babysit them until I was 11. When it finally did happen, I knew exactly what was going to happen because I'd already done it. I've always kept a journal. I remember writing about going to the plains, watching the fireworks for New Year's Eve, but the actual diary didn't say what we did. When I asked my mom, she said we stayed in our neighborhood that year. There are pictures of my sister and I at 2 of the Niagara Falls kids exhibits. I remember the glass factory and the outfit I'm wearing, but not the science factory. It doesn't even seem familiar. It's definitely a picture of me, just not the way I remember myself. I know it's normal for kids to forget things, but 15 years later, I still don't recognize myself. It was like I fell asleep, lived a different life for 4 years, went back to sleep, and woke up in another alternate life. It really shook me up. I felt like I was seeing the world through a filter. Colors were slightly different. People looked different. I felt shorter, and my emotions felt different. They were much stronger. My personality completely changed. I became withdrawn, depressed, had constant panic attacks, and overreacted to seemingly small things. My mom also agrees that my personality changed a lot around the age of 10. The sense of identity doesn't really develop until around that age, so it's possible that factors into this. As an adult, I've been diagnosed as bipolar with psychosis, borderline personality disorder, both of which feature symptoms of dissociation, depersonalization, and derealization. I don't have a dissociative disorder, so I'm pretty sure all of this was the beginning of a psychotic break, but that really doesn't make it any less weird. I never thought that my supernatural experience would be an apple. It sounds mundane, but it's actually rather interesting. When I lived on the edge of my old city, there was a huge park that took up several square miles. During my childhood, I spent a lot of time there. I knew it pretty well. After becoming an adult, I still went there often for night walks. It's usually a safe place, but there are very few people around at night. One night, I was walking down an alleyway with a bright moon guiding my way. If there had been anyone else nearby, I would have heard their footsteps, but all was quiet until something small suddenly ran by through the grass. At first, I thought it was a field mouse, but then it slowed down and stopped, so I went closer. It was just an ordinary wild apple, and I took it because there had never been any apple trees in that park. The closest ones are half a mile away. I looked around with my flashlight. It was dead silent, and I was completely alone, with nothing but maple and oak trees. The next morning, I returned to check in the daylight, but I still didn't find any apple trees, and the one apple I did see had disappeared. This happened to me while walking through the park near my old house at night. While the park looks like 2 square miles of pure nature, it's surrounded by the city on 3 sides, with a suburban area on the 4th. It's not in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes I go to this park after work. It's a safe place. Squirrels are the biggest animals, so there's usually nothing to worry about. This time, I veered away from the trails and went to the bottom of a wide ravine where there's a shallow stream and some ponds. Most of the shore is lined with bushes and trees, and there's a type of sticky black clay that the local villagers call black mud. It was a clear enough night, and there were no trees above the stream, so I could see without a flashlight. Everything seemed normal, but then I saw movement behind the bushes just 15 yards ahead of me. I walked forward slowly, trying not to make a sound. There was enough space between the bushes to see a small meadow on the other side, along with at first I thought it was a dog, but I can't remember anything about it. The only thing I remember is instinctively rushing backwards to the stream. There, I picked up the biggest branch that I could see and continued running away with frequent glances over my shoulder. But nothing was there. Half a mile later, I stopped on a hill that overlooked the ravine. All was calm and quiet. Confused, I dropped my stick and went home. I have no idea what it could be, but I was in full panic mode for a few minutes, and then I wasn't. It was like flipping a switch. My mom's side of the family lived in another town about 7 hours away. We would visit from time to time. My aunt's houses were always haunted. Strange things would always happen, and ghosts were seen a lot. Well, this time she lived at a ranch in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest town. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, my mom's mom passed away. We went to stay at my aunt's house to visit and later to go to the funeral. While we were visiting the first night, my older brother and cousins stayed up in the kitchen cooking and talking. My mom, dad, and I were in the far bedroom down the hall from the kitchen. I was watching TV and my parents were falling asleep. My brother called me into the kitchen, asked if I wanted a corn on the cob. I said no, and he asked my mom if she wanted one. I walked back into the room and asked my mom. She said no. I went back into the hallway, told my brother no, she didn't want corn. But he just stared at me with huge eyes wide open and said, okay. I didn't think much of it, just that it was weird how he looked at me. The next day, me and my brother drove to town to get something to eat. That's when he told me, when I asked my mom if she wanted corn, he said he saw a woman standing behind me, that she followed me into the room. He thought it was my mom at first, but the woman just vanished. I told him Mom and Dad were laying in bed when that happened. That's why he was looking at me weird, but didn't want to tell me that night because I would be scared. We ended up getting a hotel the next night, and we didn't stay at my aunt's again. My brother was too freaked out. I've had lots of paranormal experiences in my own childhood home as well. I'll post more in the future. When I was a child, I had 2 separate experiences that may have been supernatural or may have simply been my mind playing tricks on me. However, when I was 18 or 19, I experienced something that was definitely supernatural. On the southern tip of Staten Island, there lies a conference house and its surrounding park. Up until the early 2000s, there was about half a dozen houses on Parks Department grounds. They were vacated, demolished, so that they could make walking trails and such. An ex-girlfriend of mine has lived in one of those houses with her mother and sisters. When I would spend the night, I would share a pull-out bed with her in the living room. However, there was one night where it was particularly hot, so we went upstairs and slept in her sister's bedroom since it was cooler in there, and they wouldn't be home that night. For whatever reason, I couldn't sleep comfortably that night. I would wake up and just look towards the window across the room. Around the 3rd time I woke up, I saw something standing between the bed and the window, nearer to the window. I was told that this house was haunted, and in the 1.5 years since I'd started hanging out there with my ex and her sisters, I'd never seen anything. So this one night, I see standing near the window a silhouette of a human figure. It was just standing there. Even though the room was dark, there was still enough moonlight illuminating the room, yet what I saw was pitch black. I'm talking as black can be. I definitely was not able to make out any facial distinctions. It was like devoid of anything human. It was really just a black silhouette, and it was terrifying. After staring at this entity for what seemed like forever, or just 3 seconds, I woke up my then girlfriend. I asked if she was seeing what I was seeing, and she did. I asked quickly what we should do. She said that we should go downstairs, to which all I could say was, okay. Luckily, the door to the hallway was about 2 feet away from the bed on her side. After she got up, I quickly followed. Instead of getting up on my side, which would have placed me between the foot of the bed and the entity, I rolled across the bed and hurried my way out, never looking back. That was the one and only time I ever experienced anything in that house, but that moment has stayed with me for nearly 20 years. Even though those houses were demolished in the early 2000s, I don't dare walk down that block at night. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode, but don't miss a brand new one every Friday night, and my other weekly uploads every Sunday and Wednesday. I would be forever grateful if you would like this video, subscribe to The Darkest Hour if you haven't already, turn on notifications, and of course, talk to me in the comments. I want to thank those who shared their stories, and a big thanks to all of you for listening. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. A huge shout out to all of my patrons whom I appreciate so very much. Thank you all for your support. TRACY S, TAMARA K, Monica L, ZOEWATT, Shelly B, Donald C, Rat Girl, ALISHA S, ERIN G, NIKKI H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, LISSANE, and ARLENE F. You all are the best. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Thanks everyone, and stay spooky.